Okay, well, today we're going to do our pre-reading notes for Cask of Amontillado by Edgar Allan Poe. So make sure that you are following along. You have this video open in one tab, and then you have your guided notes open in another tab so that you can take notes while we go through the presentation. Also make sure that you move this into your English 1 folder, and you do that again by clicking on this folder icon up here, and then clicking back until you get to your drive, and then you're able to relocate where you keep these notes so that they are in your English 1 folder, and you can refer back to them when you are ready. Okay, so we're going to go through a few different literary terms today. So the first is an unreliable narrator. So narrators can either be reliable or unreliable. A reliable narrator is telling you the story exactly as it is, exactly as it's happening, but an unreliable narrator is misleading or misinforming the readers for some reason. As always with notes, if you need to pause to jot something down and then restart when you're finished, that is absolutely fine. You can kind of take this at your own pace. So when are narrators considered unreliable? So there's a few different situations. Your narrator could have a mental illness, and so they aren't able to tell you exactly what is truthfully happening. They might be only telling part of the truth or lying or exaggerating. So maybe they're trying to paint themselves in a better light, or maybe they are guilty of something and they are trying to pass it off as if they are not guilty. They could be piecing together a memory. So maybe the narrator is thinking of something that happened to them a long time ago, and they don't quite remember it. So maybe they're looking back at, something from their life, and we can't necessarily 100% trust what they're saying to be true because it's a memory from their childhood. Sometimes the narrator is a child themselves or is in some other way immature. Again, that's not always going to be the most reliable. If you think about if you have little brothers or sisters or cousins, you know that they don't always tell the truth, or they sometimes exaggerate things or make things sound worse than they really are. They could have some kind of personality flaw, and they could also have prejudices about race, class, or gender that influence the way that they tell the story. So it's important to think about what kind of narrator you have when you are reading, especially a narrative that is told in first person, so told from like the I, me, my perspective, because you just don't know if you're really getting the full story all the time. So if you think about that, there's the saying that like there's 3 sides to every story, his side, her side, and the truth, right? So if we're only getting one person's side of the story, is it really that reliable? And that's something that you want to kind of bring a critical eye to when you are reading short stories and novels. And so here is just a little cartoon. Unreliable narrator is when the narrator doesn't tell the real story. So this guy's saying, I don't know who took the money, but it wasn't me. Here's how it happened, right? So of course, someone who's a criminal is going to try to place the guilt somewhere else or place the blame somewhere else and not take responsibility for the things that they do. So those are the types of people that you will see as being unreliable narrators in their stories. Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about is dramatic irony. So we already talked about situational irony a couple of weeks ago, where what you expect to happen is not what happens, right? Your reasonable expectations of a situation are not fulfilled. So it's the opposite of what you expected. Dramatic irony still has to do with expectations, but it occurs when the audience knows something that the characters do not. So we as the audience have an expectation of what's going to happen, but the characters themselves do not have that same expectation. So we are going to watch a short video, and again, feel free to pause if you need to get this definition down before we go on. So here we will watch about dramatic irony.
What do horror movies and comedies have in common? The two genres might seem totally different, but the reason they're both so popular is perhaps because of what they have in common: their use of dramatic irony. First, let's clarify. There are 3 types of irony out there: Situational irony is when you expect one thing but get the opposite. Verbal irony is when someone says something but truly means the opposite. Dramatic irony, though, is what we'll be looking at right now. Dramatic irony is when the audience seems to know more about an event, a situation, or a conversation than the characters in the movie, on the show, or in the book do. The audience is in on a secret that the characters have missed. This is a great storytelling device that creates tremendous emotion within that text. Think about it for a moment. How does it feel when, in a horror film, you know that the scary villain is hiding behind that door in the darkened room? The music becomes eerie, the lighting creates complete shadows. This has to be bad for the hero. Of course, though, that hero must enter the room to find the villain. You feel tremendous tension and the suspense of knowing that someone will jump out and be scary, but you just don't know when. That tension is dramatic irony. You know something more than the characters in the film. Now, take the typical comedy. There will probably be some type of misunderstanding. Again, we know more of what is going on than the characters do. Picture two characters making a plan for a birthday surprise for their roommate, while that roommate overhears the entire conversation from the hallway. From there, confusion and misunderstanding occur, and the tension builds. But this isn't the same tension as the horror film, since it is probably pretty funny as the characters try to figure out the who's and the what's. But it serves as a great example of the tension and suspense of dramatic irony. This tension or suspense in both genres drives the story and keeps the plot progressing. The audience wants, no, needs, to see the tension of the dramatic irony broken either by the scary person jumping out of the shadows or by someone finally revealing someone's true identity and clearing up the confusion. So when you feel like you are in on a secret, that is dramatic irony, a hallmark of all the great writers, from Shakespeare to Hitchcock.
Okay, so that's a little bit more about dramatic irony. And what I really like that they point out there is that it's used for two main purposes, and that's to create suspense and to create humor. So in the story that we're about to read, it's definitely going to be used to create suspense. All throughout the story, there's going to be something that we know about our main character that the other character in the story does not know. And that will continue to build the suspense and add tension to the story until it's resolved. This would be another example. I'm not going to play you this whole entire song, but if you're familiar with Frozen, you've probably heard the song that Olaf sings about how excited he is for summertime. This is dramatic irony again, because we as the audience know that snowmen melt in the summer sun, but Olaf does not know that. And so he's hoping for summer, even though we as the audience know that when summer comes, he would just melt. So this would be more of an example of a humorous type of dramatic irony versus a suspenseful. Go ahead and pause the video now and write down an example of dramatic irony in your notes. So it can be one that we just talked about, it could be one from the video, or if you have another example that you can think of. And then once you have done that, go ahead and restart the video. The last type of irony that we're going to look at is verbal irony. Verbal irony can also be called sarcasm, and it's basically when a person says or writes the opposite of what they truly mean. So we expect people to be honest and tell the truth, but when they're using verbal irony, they are not meeting that expectation. They're saying the opposite of what is true, and occasionally it's funny. Sometimes it can be a little bit, I don't know. You know, some people might take it as being rude sometimes when you use sarcasm, but it doesn't have to be. It's just saying the opposite of what you really mean. So if it's pouring down rain and you say, man, what a nice day we're having, that's verbal irony. Teenagers are pretty notorious for using verbal irony, so it should be an easy one for you all to understand. So we'll watch another short video that explains this type of irony, and then we'll move on.
Great weather we're having! Awesome job! You're a tremendous athlete. Compliments, right? Well, maybe. Depending on the attitude and tone of voice behind these lines, they very well may be compliments. They may also be, though, pointed and attacking lines. This slight change of attitude behind the lines reveals what we call verbal irony. So when someone says, "Great weather we're having," it is quite possible that person really means that. If the sun is shining, the birds are singing, and the wind is calm. But if the weather is horrible, the clouds are looming, and the wind is a raging tempest, and someone says, "Great weather we're having," he probably doesn't actually mean that. He probably means that the weather is horrible, but he has said the opposite. This is verbal irony, when the speaker says the opposite of what he means. I know what you're thinking. Isn't this sarcasm? Isn't the speaker being sarcastic? Yes. When a speaker says the opposite of what he means, that is verbal irony. When the speaker then goes the step farther to mean the opposite of what he says and seeks to be a little pointed and mean, like he's making fun of something, then you have sarcasm. Take the second example. Awesome job! Someone accomplishing his lifelong dream? Awesome. Someone winning a sports championship? Awesome. Someone rear-ends another car? Not awesome. So when the passenger says, "Awesome job," they probably mean the opposite with a hint of poking fun. That is verbal irony, and that is sarcastic. "You're a talented athlete." Said to an Olympian? Authentic. No verbal irony present. Said to the klutzy kid tripping into English class and spilling his books and pencil case all over the room? Now that's just harsh and verbally ironic, because what you said is not what you meant. That is verbal irony. You have said the opposite of what you mean. Additionally, since you have the intention of mocking this poor person, you have been not only verbally ironic, but sarcastic as well. Beware, though. While all sarcasm fits the definition of verbal irony, not all verbal irony is sarcastic. Verbal irony is where what is meant is the opposite of what is said, while sarcasm adds that little punch of attitude. There are times, though, where another layer of meaning can be present without that sarcastic tone. All right, now go out there and find those examples of verbal irony and sarcasm. Good luck. No, seriously, I mean it. Good luck. No, really, I truly want to wish you luck on this difficult task. Okay, sincerely, good luck. You can do it. No verbal irony here.
Okay, so that is verbal irony. So again, just saying something that is the opposite of what you truly mean. So go ahead and pause the video, take a minute to write down an example of verbal irony in your notes. And then resume when you are ready. Okay, the next thing we're going to learn about is hyperbole. So a hyperbole is a rhetorical device that is an exaggerated statement or claim that is not meant to be taken literally. So if you remember from last week, or maybe a couple weeks ago now, we had the term hyper for one of our word parts, and hyper means over. Okay, so a hyperbole is over-exaggerated. It's not meant to be taken literally. So you might say, like, "I'm so hungry I could eat a horse," right? Well, you probably aren't really hungry enough to eat a whole horse. Or, "This is taking forever." Okay, it might be taking a while, but it's not taking forever, because forever is a very, 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 very long time. So you're not literally saying forever, but you're using a hyperbole to make your point. So it's emphasis to kind of, it's a literary device that emphasizes whatever situation is going on. Okay. Okay, so that is a hyperbole. The next one is symbolism. So symbolism occurs when a writer uses one thing Usually it's a physical object, but it could be a color to represent something deeper and more abstract. So when we think about symbolism, I think the easiest way to relate it is just to our everyday life. We have symbols that we use in everyday life that mean something different because of our culture and what we are used to. So for example, if you are sitting in your car and you are at a light, when it turns green, that symbolizes that you can go. If it's red, that symbolizes that you need to stop. Similarly, if you're driving down the street and you see a bright red octagon-shaped sign, that is a symbol that in our society means stop. If you see a heart drawn on a note card, that probably symbolizes love. If you see, if you've ever seen the peace sign, right, that symbolizes peace. So symbols are basically just a stand-in, right? It's one thing that represents something else, right? There's no reason that inherently an 8-sided red sign should mean stop, but it's just what our society and our culture has decided that means. So it's a symbol that represents something beyond its physical meaning. Okay, so we're going to watch a short video to help understand a little bit more about symbolism.
Symbolism is everywhere. It's in the movies you watch, the TV shows that you watch, the books that you read. So we're going to take a closer look at it. By the end of this video, you should be able to answer the questions: what is symbolism? How do you identify symbolism? And why is symbolism used? In order to understand symbolism, we first have to make sure we understand what symbols are. A symbol is an object that stands for something else. So when something is a symbol, it is not what it literally is, but the idea, the feeling, the belief, or the other object that it represents. Let's take fire, for instance. Fire can be fire, or it can be a symbol that represents knowledge, new life, inspiration, or a more negative connotation, death, destruction, and hell. In these cases, fire is not fire, but representative of some other ideas. What then is symbolism? For the purposes of English class, symbolism is something used by authors to give the reader a deeper understanding of the text, and to give the text a deeper meaning. How does the author do this? Well, the author uses symbols. Something that will be able to represent an idea or feeling or other object that will relate to the themes the author is trying to convey. Let's go back to our example of fire. In The Hunger Games, the author, Suzanne Collins, associates Katniss with fire throughout the novels, even referring to her as the girl on fire. Katniss is not literally on fire, but she is a spark. She is new ideas and a new way of living and thinking for the people of Panem. Identifying symbolism is not easy to do. It requires some additional thought about what the author is trying to do. Some of the steps you can follow are to summarize the text or chapter that you've read, identify repeated themes that the author is conveying, and think about what objects could stand for related to those themes. Take a few moments to think about why authors would use symbolism. Authors use symbolism for a variety of reasons. Generally speaking, it makes for better storytelling, generates more interest for the reader. Symbolism can convey complex messages, connect story and theme, and show instead of tell. Take your time answering the symbolism questions. You will be responsible for identifying symbols and their meanings while reading Legend and
Okay, so we're obviously not reading that story, but we will be talking about symbolism during the Cask of Amontillado. So make sure that you are thinking about what things could have deeper meanings, and we'll kind of go through that together because I know symbolism is one of the trickier literary devices. So write an example of symbolism in your notes. It could be something they talked about in the video, could be an example that I gave, but pause the video, jot down an example, and resume the video when you're ready. Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about is the setting of the story. So this story takes place during Carnival, which is a festival that was held in Italy and continues to be held today. Our story takes place hundreds of years ago, but this is still something that Italians celebrate. And so we're going to watch just a little clip of what it would look like so that you can kind of get a sense of what the world is like for our main characters. Oops.
Imagine the bleakness of winter in ancient and medieval times, the despair, the short days and long nights, barren fields, the hunger, and the cold. Imagine the need for a promise that summer will return, and the joy when finally the fields spring to life and once again bear fruit. Imagine also the comfort in knowing that God or the gods had not abandoned you and your family. Rituals, whether Christian or pagan, gave people hope, reminding them that the darkness of winter is always followed by life-giving spring.
The church wisely adapted the pagan seasonal calendar to fit the story it wanted to tell. It rebranded this winter season of scarcity as a time of purification for Christians and called it Lent. But before the deprivation of Lent, there was a rowdy period of anything goes. And this hedonistic fling is Carnival.
Perhaps the most famous European carnival festivals are in Venice. Venice, in the quiet of winter, lives up to its early name, La Serenissima, the Serene Republic. Visitors at this time of year bundle up and enjoy the city's chilly embrace. And each winter, Carnival casts a spell on Venetians and visitors alike. Following a tradition that originated in the 13th century, the city slips behind a mask of anonymity as Venetians promenade, pose, and pretend they're someone they're not. Authority is challenged. Rules are broken. The goal? To indulge in everything that'll be forbidden in Lent. An elegant disguise is both transformative and liberating. But it's the mask, so symbolic of this enigmatic city, which feels like a cloak of invisibility. While the original 13th century masks had symbolic functions, today's costumes are more fanciful. While they all give a nod to tradition, many are more contemporary and colorful. Though the masks may have changed, the pleasurable appeal of anonymity has not. As dusk falls, the backstreets come alive with strangers. Now, as then, decadence rules the night.
Okay, so that just kind of gives you a little bit of an idea of what Venice and different places in Italy would look like during this time. So everyone is wearing masks. Everyone is, kind of having a party. They're having a great time. And this is the backdrop for our story. Now, one other thing that I do want to briefly show you is what catacombs are. Because the other part of the story takes place in a catacomb, and that's sort of an unusual term that we don't hear very often. So we're going to just watch again a little bit of this video to show you a little bit more about what a catacomb actually is.
Welcome to our Crypts, Bones, and Catacombs tour, your chance to explore Rome's eerie underground. Leave the modern city behind as you go back 2,000 years to a past frozen in time. We'll provide private air-conditioned transport to the catacombs of Santa Priscilla. One of the first underground cemeteries for Christians in Rome, the dark tunnels are filled with ancient inscriptions and beautiful frescoes, including the world's oldest depiction of the Virgin Mary. As rewarding as these catacombs are, they are the least visited of the 5 that are openly accessible, preserving the atmosphere one expects in a catacomb. Catacombs simply cannot handle the crowds and large group tours without losing their essential aura. Navigate then these corridors in the comfort of your small group as your guide reveals this perfectly intact ancient site. The city beneath your
Okay, so like it showed there in the video, the catacomb is underneath the ground, and it's where they would bury people or have different memorials or tombs or different things. So a lot of the story takes place in one of these catacombs, and I really want you to visualize some of those underground. You saw how narrow the passages were. You saw how dark everything is. So really visualize that when you are reading this story and they get down into the catacombs. So that is it for our notes for Cask of Amontillado.